Hello everyone. Today we're going to start talking about James Joyce. Um, I'm not sure how many videos I will be able to shoot, but I'll take advantage of the few occasions in which I'm in a bit of a peaceful atmosphere and try to use them to give you some content to study on. So as I told you, the work we're going to deal with as far as Joyce is concerned is Dubliners. Dubliners is a collection of short stories which was published in 1914. Um, the title is indicative of um, the setting, of course, which is Dublin. All the main characters either live there or have a connection to the city of Dublin. Um, this city has gone through several different periods. Um, if we consider Dublin at the beginning of the Victorian Age, it was actually a place of um, thriving, economically speaking, and uh, concerning the life of the citizens as well. In the sense that it was architecturally quite pleasing. It had a vivacious life. People were able to do many things, and especially they had the chance to become rich or have at least an economically sound situation. It was a place where Irish people went to find fortune. This was mainly due to its port, which was the second after London as far as trading was concerned. So at the beginning of the Victorian Age, Dublin was a prospering city. What happened to it was that in the course of the century, its economy became more and more stagnant. The job opportunities were much less, and um, in a sense, people reflected in their psychology this situation of stagnation. Unemployment rates were quite high, uh, and this general feeling of not being able to change the situation was had in a sense imbued the mind of all citizens in Dublin. And it is important to remember that the title is not Dublin, it's Dubliners, in the sense that Joyce did want to focus on the stagnation of the city, but most importantly, he wanted to focus on the psychology of the people living there or being influenced by the city of Dublin. So this is mainly a work in which Joyce shows us as a writer how capable he is of depicting the psychological nuances of people who, for one reason or another, are stuck in a moment of their lives and are unable to move. They're like paralyzed in a sense. And in a sense, the word paralysis is actually central in this collection of short stories because every single one contains the description of a type of paralysis. It could be a paralysis connected to health or to psychology or to morality or to the inability to act, take an action, to make a decision. So every single character in these 15 short stories is in a moment of their lives in which they have to make a choice or are faced with a situation which puts them in a condition of paralysis. Joyce, in a letter to a friend, defined this feeling of paralysis which uh, involved the whole of Dublin as a hemiplegia of the will. Um, Hemiplegia is a medical condition in which your brain um, has had a stroke and only half of your body can move. So it's a hemiparalysis. It's not a full paralysis of the will. So the capacity of acting, of deciding, of um, suggesting something and then taking an action to put it into practice. So according to Dublin, the people living in, according to Joyce, sorry, the people living in Dublin were stuck in a moment in which they were unable to move, to decide, to act. They were um, so stagnant, psychologically speaking, that they were actually um, preferring immobility to movement. So it was a kind of, let's say, depression in which they were comfortable. And so it was very difficult for them to move away from it. This collection, as I told you in the beginning, is made of 15 short stories. They were not actually written in the year in which they were published, which is 1914. As I said, they were actually written in a span of years, which was from 1905 to 1907, 1908. And so Joyce decided to collect all of these short stories and put them together to publish them, but he had quite a few difficulties in having them published for several different reasons. Some of these were considered to be obscene, and for the time, so we're talking about the beginning of the last century, obscene was an adjective which was used quite um, often for things that right now would seem illogical, but simply speaking quite openly about sexuality was considered to be obscene. Uh, Mentioning royal figures or figures of power in a demeaning way was considered as um, not suitable for publishing. And so Joyce had a very hard time having this collection published as a whole, but eventually in 1914 he managed to do so. Um, One concept which we have already gone through when we were talking about moments of being, so I'll refer you to the video about Mrs. Dalloway in which I've spoken about that. The another concept which we can find in the Dubliners, in Dubliners, and then also in other works by Joyce, is the concept of epiphany. Um, I'll just quickly refer to it for a second. So epiphany, according to Joyce, is a moment in life when a person has a revelation about either his own life or life in general. This revelation is generally triggered by a meaningless, unimportant event which happens in the life of a person. It might be, and it often is in the short stories, uh, music. So it is often connected to a song or a piece of music either being sung or played, which triggers something, a memory normally, in the life of a person, in the mind of a person. Sorry if I'm keeping on switching words, but yeah, the period is like this. And so it is triggered by an important event which happens in the life of a person. Uh, but most importantly, after this revelation, the characters tend to make a decision uh, aiming at changing their lives. So after this revelation, their life does not go back to being what it was before, but this relation gives them the strength, the will to make a change, to take action. Now, of course, in Dubliners, the main point of the collection was depicting the paralysis of the dwellers of this town. And so, even when they do have an epiphany, they very rarely are able to make a change. So they momentarily seem to be able to do so, but then something happens which stops them, which is their paralysis and hemiplegia of the will. The only short story which has a positive outcome in the end is the last one, the one closing the collection, entitled The Dead, in which the main character imagines leaving Dublin to for the west of Ireland to find a new beginning. Actually, Joyce meant eventually to write another collection of short stories about set in Ireland as a whole, in different cities, not just Dublin, but that project never saw the light of day. So all these short stories, except the last one, even if they do feature an epiphany at some point, they also show the inability of the characters to react and to move on or change. Many aspects of Joyce's writings, not only Dubliners, which is perhaps the most understandable one, but also Ulysses, which we mentioned when we talked about the interior monologue, and other works contain a highly symbolic language. So very rarely one word is just what it is. You cannot just take everything Joyce writes at face value. You need to dig deeper and go beyond the meaning of the word and try to see what that word can symbolize in the context in which it is used. Many critics have interpreted Joyce's writings, giving different opinions and visions of what he was saying. We will read together one short story, which is Evelyn, taken from this collection. And while we read that, we will also try and spot the words that have a symbolic value, the epiphany, and all the details which make this story an exemplary representative of this collection. As an introduction to this collection of short stories, I would say this is enough for you to have a vague idea of what Joyce wanted to achieve. Of course, this collection is not exactly representative of Joyce as a writer, because it is the least experimental, it is the least innovative in terms of language, but it shows his skills as a writer in depicting the human psyche. To Joyce, this was a central point, studying and representing the human psyche. We mentioned this before when we talked about the interior monologue, the extreme one, the one only with the level of the mind, the one with the two levels of narration. He always attempted to show readers how minds work in written words. In his personal biography, he was actually a deep supporter of Freudian psychoanalysis, which was moving its first steps when he wrote, when he operated. And we can see this in his works, in the sense that he always tries to work on the subconscious and the unconscious as a writer, as a producer of literature, but with a very keen eye to that aspect of science, which was at that time being explored and was starting to become quite popular among people. Um, in the next video, we're going to read together the short story Evelyn. So I would like you to go back to your collection of excerpts and watch that video with in front of you the pages from 15 to 17, which are the whole short story Evelyn. It is not clipped, it is the full version of the short story. Probably I will divide the video into two parts to make it less heavy to follow. But so for next time, for next video, be there with your excerpts, page 15 to 17. Thanks.